I'm Trench Reynolds. I write crime. There was a time when my keyboard wasn't chained to the blood-soaked hallways of American schools. Back then, my beat ran darker in a different way, through the back alleys of the internet where classifieds like Craigslist promised cheap deals and easy dates, but sometimes paid out in bullets instead of bargains. I kept score, and the numbers didn't lie. By my estimates, there were 144 murders, and even gross, played out under Craigslist dim neon glow. What follows is just one of those stories, pulled from the shadows and laid bare. Jacksonville, Florida, July 2010. A city heavy with summer heat. Craigslist glowing like neon in the dark. A place where strangers looked for connection, escape, or temptation. But one young man wasn't looking for love. He was looking for a victim. That man was 19-year-old David Spar. On July 12, 2010, he met 21-year-old Tiara Poole through Craigslist. A Navy wife, a mother, a student trying to carve out a better life for herself. She was stuck in a troubled marriage. She thought she was finding companionship. What she found instead was horror. Spar stabbed her 89 times. 89. Not in a rage, not in passion, but in cold calculation. Prosecutors called it a thrill kill, and they were right. 89 stab wounds. That's not an accident. That's obsession. That's a man who doesn't just want to kill, he wants to linger in it. I remember writing about it then. The brutality, the randomness, and how little attention it got outside Florida. Tiara's murder never cracked the national media cycle. And I'll say it bluntly. Race and geography had a lot to do with it. She was black. She lived in Jacksonville, Florida. Not New York, not Boston, not the Northeast, where the media feeds on stories like these. If she had, you would have seen wall-to-wall coverage. Instead, Tiara Poole's story was left to local news and blogs like mine. When the spotlight doesn't shine, the shadow grows deeper. And in those shadows, victims are forgotten. Spar was arrested days later in South Carolina. At first, his family rallied behind him. They came to my blog, arguing he was being framed, that the evidence was flimsy, that the fingerprints didn't match. They even tried to shift blame onto Tiara. Because she was married, they said, she bore some responsibility for what happened. That's the kind of victim blaming that has always infuriated me, but it wasn't unusual. The trial, though, told the truth. In December 2011, Spar was convicted of first-degree murder. His defense attorney tried to float the idea that Spar blacked out after learning Tiara was married. A courtroom soap opera. The jury didn't buy it. Then came the penalty phase. A man's last chance to save his life, to bring in family, friends, anyone who might tip the scale. But Spar? He refused it all. No witnesses, no testimony, nothing but silence. Against his attorney's advice, Spar waived his right to present mitigating witnesses. He didn't want anyone to speak for him. During the reading of the jury's recommendation, he smiled. Smiled as the jury said he should die for what he did to Tiara Poole. A judge made it official in March of 2012, the death sentence. He smirked at fate, like the whole system was a joke, and he was in on it. But the laugh didn't last long, because then the truth about who he was came spilling out. That's when the jailhouse letter surfaced, a letter Spar wrote to his ex-girlfriend. And in that letter, he admitted what prosecutors had argued all along. He planned Tiara's murder a week in advance. She wasn't his only fantasy. He claimed he had shot someone else before, but he wanted to experience stabbing. He said killing her gave him a rush. He said he enjoyed it. He said he wanted to do it again. He even described tilting her head back and slicing her throat. These weren't the words of someone with diminished capacity. These were the words of someone who gloried in murder. After that letter became public, his family, the same family who had once defended him and blamed Tiara, went silent. Not another word, not a peep in his defense. Because when a man puts down in writing that he loved to kill, even his blood can't wash that stain away. From there, the appeals began. 2015. The Florida Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. His lawyers argued he'd been let down by ineffective counsel, and that his background of mental health issues and substance abuse should have spared him. But the court said no. By 2018, he was back again, asking for a new trial. Again, he was claiming diminished capacity. In 2019, his attorney told the Supreme Court that his 5 defense lawyers were disorganized, chasing credentials instead of defending him. They painted his case as chaos at the defense table. But the truth was simpler. It wasn't the lawyers, it wasn't the judge, it was the man himself. A man who admitted in black and white that he wanted to kill again. Through it all, Tiara's family had no appeals. They had no retrials. They can't file motions to bring her back. All they've had is the silence left behind by her death. The courts argue over paperwork. The families argue with silence. That's the kind of justice that grinds the soul down. And now, 15 years later, the Spar name is back in the news. Not for David, but for his father, Eric. Rewind the tape. Spring Bluff, Georgia, 1985. A country church. Harold and Thelma Swain, husband and wife, beloved in their community, gunned down during a prayer meeting. A crime that shocked the town and stayed unsolved for decades. In 2003, another man, Dennis Perry, was convicted. He spent years behind bars, but DNA cleared him. He was exonerated. That DNA pointed to Eric Spar, David's father. Journalist Joshua Sharp chronicled it all in his book, The Man No One Believed. In it, he revealed what prosecutors later confirmed. The accused church shooter was the father of Florida's Craigslist killer. And here's the strange part. Eric even testified at one of David's hearings in 2017. The family was already entangled in the justice system long before Eric's arrest. Like father, like son. 2 murders, 2 states, 2 decades apart, and one family name tying them together like a curse. This October, Eric will go on trial for the murders of Harold and Thelma Swain, 40 years after they were killed in their church. So now you've got a son on Florida's death row for the thrill killing of a young mother, and a father accused of gunning down 2 pillars of a Georgia community. 2 Spars, 2 timelines, 2 trails of blood. Florida and Georgia, past and present, father and son, blood calling to blood across the years. But it's not the Spars whose names we should remember. This story is about Tiara Poole, a young mother in Jacksonville whose murder never got the attention it deserved because of where she lived and the color of her skin. It's about Harold and Thelma Swain, a couple remembered for kindness, murdered in a place that should have been safe. The killers get the ink. The killers get the airtime. But the victims, they're the ones who carry the weight in silence. David Spar remains on death row. Eric Spar will face his trial this fall. What matters most is that we don't forget Tiara, that we don't forget Harold and Thelma, that we keep their names alive, even when the headlines fade. For Tiara Poole, and for Harold and Thelma Swain, remember them. Thank you for listening. If you want the whole archive, the stuff that doesn't always make it onto YouTube, you can go to my website at realcrime.net. 25 years of me digging into these stories. My latest posts have been about the recent school shooting in Minneapolis. There will be an episode on that sometime in the future, once I feel like the story has reached a conclusion. And if you want to help keep this going and keep the lights on, please visit patreon.com/Trench Reynolds. Every bit of support matters, and special thanks to patrons Mare and Trish. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that. And until next time, stay off of Craigslist. I'm Trench Reynolds, and I write crime.